is Greta Bayrami, and I'm here with the Rootless team today. And I have the pleasure of sitting down with Joshua Cliffords from FreeWater. And I found these guys on TikTok as I was scrolling through my feed, and I had to learn more because I was fascinated to learn that they were the first free beverage out there giving free water. So Joshua, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited to get to know more about your story and what started this whole thing. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Greta.
A lot of people listening to the Rootless settings, they know that we always start everything with one question, and that question being, when I say rootless, does that mean anything? Like, what comes to mind when I mention the word rootless to you?
For me, rootless would mean, obviously, without roots, I guess going the unconventional route. And so I think that describes this project well, because I'm self-taught and I didn't pick any of this up in a traditional, outlet or school, or so kind of had to grab everything, bits and pieces from everywhere. So if I had to say what rootless meant for me, it would be go the unconventional route.
And let's dive right into that. Tell us a little bit about your roots, Joshua. Like, what was it? Where are you from? Where did you grow up? And paint us a little picture.
I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and I think I was just like many of my friends or any kid out there. Always was an entrepreneur. When I was 9 or 10 years old, I had a lemonade stand, and one day I decided to make a free lemonade stand, and I made more than $1,000 in a weekend selling all my baseball, basketball, and football cards. And so it took me a while, but I talked my parents into letting me invest that money into Microsoft when I was 10 years old. And so that did quite well for me at that age, and I was able to sell that stock when I turned 18, and I used it to travel the world.
Impressive.
From there, kind of just have always been an entrepreneur.
So I'm assuming you didn't go the traditional route right after high school?
I went and did some junior college. I played sports. I wanted to be an athlete. I've always been a horrible student, and so the traditional route would never be a good route for me.
And talk to us a little bit about, I guess, the travels. What was your first dive? Well, obviously your first dive at entrepreneurship was the lemonade stand, but what came after that?
I owned a gym for athletes in Los Angeles, and I specialized in training athletes up until my mid-20s. And I was really bored with that life. And so I sold the business, I bought an RV, and I traveled around America for a year and a half. Then I ran out of gas money, I sold it, and I traveled in South America for a while. And then was still really bored. So I enlisted in the Army to go from civilian to Green Beret. And I got hurt while training to be in special forces. And
wow.
So after that, I was close to 30, and I sold everything I owned to do a trip around the world. And on that trip, I met some refugees from Nigeria that were in a really tough spot. And that kind of really changed my life and ultimately led us to starting this project.
Wow. What an impressive resume. I mean, we could have a whole nother podcast just learning about your travel tips. Maybe that will be something you'll do later on.
Definitely so. If there's one thing I could do well, it's travel tips.
Wow. That's just impressive. I'm just thinking about that. So that leads me to my next question of whether it was the product or the idea that came first. And from what I'm hearing, it seems like you might have had the idea from meeting these refugees.
It didn't happen overnight, but from traveling around America for a year and a half in the RV, I did notice that you could go in the most backcountry of untouched wilderness that exists, and you could carry your tent and everything, and you could walk for 3 days into the wilderness, and eventually you'll make camp somewhere, and you'll look around the corner and you'll find trash everywhere. And so I noticed there's no such thing as an untouched natural place anymore, or at least I've never seen it. And so same thing on my trip around the world. You'd go to places like Petra, which literally are one of the 7 wonders of the world, and you just find trash everywhere. And no matter where you go, no matter what you do, there's always trash. And so that definitely stood out in my mind. And then I was in Rome for 5 minutes after traveling around the world for about 9 months. And I was really touched by the story of 2 Nigerian refugees who had to leave their country. And this was back in 2015. And the sad thing is, for us Americans, no matter what your news source is, it all said that these were bad people. They were all extremists. They were this, they were that. And these people that I had met were wonderful. And so I canceled that trip around the world, and I started a nonprofit organization in Eastern Europe called Save the Refugees. And actually met my wife while volunteering. She was also a volunteer. And so we, together with some other people, we volunteered for about a year and a half, and we helped more than 10,000 refugees. And we would talk to every person we could and say, hey, tell us your story. We had translators, the whole 9 yards. And we found that roughly 20% of them had left their countries because they didn't have access to water, food, or medicine. And so kept researching. It took a lot of research, and we realized that 30 to 40 million people die every year around the world because they don't have access to these essential goods. And when I say medicine, if you just gave everybody on earth a bar of hand soap, that would save 10 million lives a year just right there. And that's obviously obtainable. And so at the time, it was like, man, I wish somebody could create a business model that made saving a life or the environment or some sort of cause as easy as eating a free slice of pizza or drinking a free water. And so from there, started the brainstorming, and then it took 2 years to invent everything, and then another 2 years to bring it to market, and here we are.
Wow, I mean, that story hits home because I'm from Albania, and I grew up in a country that is still struggling, maybe not as much as some other countries, but there's definitely still areas throughout Albania, especially in the north, that people lack those essentials, like electricity, running water, drinkable water. So it's definitely honorable to see that you took that as a mission. It was my next question, why water? But I think I understand now. And it is a tragedy.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Albania too. Beautiful country.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, I mean, that's why my parents came here, right? My parents came here when I was 10 for just a better everything, right? This is the land of opportunity. This is the land where you can at least have resources if you're willing to work for them. So, I mean, water, I mean, this idea around water, and if you could talk a little bit more about that, and so people listening really understand the mission here, because it is achievable in the day and age that we live, and with the help of all other first world countries, I think it's doable to have water for everyone.
So looking back, what I did was I worked backwards. And so what I found, starting with water, for example, it only costs roughly $5 billion with a B. It's not a little bit of money, but $5 billion to solve the global water crisis permanently around the world. That's building water wells, rain catcher systems, whatever you need holistically for that village. 5 billion. And the reason why governments won't ever, or corporations won't ever do it on their own, is because water is a publicly traded commodity. And if the powers to be have their way, it's going to be $50 a bottle, definitely way more than it is today. And other governments use water politics against one another. If they have leverage over their neighboring country, they might turn the water spigot off if they don't do what they say. And so the goal was, okay, well, it's got to be outside of government, because if governments wanted to solve this, they would already have snapped their fingers and solved it, because 5 billion is nothing for these corporations and government entities. And so then I realized, okay, well, listen, the product's free. It's going to have a high turnover rate. If just 10% if we donate a minimum of 10 cents per bottle, which says on every FreeWater, and we get 10% of Americans to drink our free product daily, we will reach $5 billion after that year of getting this 10% of Americans to do this. And so it really seems obtainable, at least for me, when you look at it from that perspective. We don't need 10% of Americans to do anything extra, to spend anything extra. We want to save them on average $250 to $350 per year, because that's what the average American spends on bottled water annually. So by saving Americans $350 a year, we could solve this problem permanently.
You're on a mission that I hope that everybody supports and follows. And when you look at your team and you look at what you've done in the short amount of time, where do you think you stand? What it's you against this $5 billion goal?
Yeah, in a really good spot, to be honest. It was really hard just to invent these things. And when I first decided to do this initially and do this full time back in 2017, I couldn't even type or use a computer. So it wasn't even, it was more of a matter of, am I really going to do this? Am I able to teach myself how to use a computer from scratch and then somehow be the founder of a tech company? And, it was really daunting. So at that time, what I told myself is odds are you're not going to make it, but you have two ways to be successful. Number one is you do such a great job that the Coke, Pepsi, Nestle, or Amazon copies you and squishes you like a bug, and that you become the MySpace of free supermarkets, and somebody opens a better free supermarket that gives more money to charity than you. And option two is it would be great to get my return on investment and be the CEO of a company that I do think will ultimately make Amazon obsolete. And we've gotten the project to a point now where I think it's guaranteed one of those two outcomes. I think if we quit today and closed our doors today, people would copy us, and they would solve what we want to solve anyways. And yeah, if this was Vegas, I would bet that we're probably going to be recognized as the next Google in the next year or two. So we're in a really good spot, but it was 0% easy.
Well, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I just want to add a side note that I grew up in one of those countries where the water would come on at only 2 hours a day, once in the afternoon and once at nighttime. So I remember my grandmother would be like, we got to go home because the water comes on in an hour. So for those listening, I know that sounds like a tragedy, but you have no idea what it's like to work or live in a country where the water only comes for 2 hours a day. We had to store a lot of it. So yeah, this is amazing to hear. And let's go back on that business plan, because you said I didn't really care about computers. I didn't really know how to use them, but here you are. Obviously it wasn't easy, but talk to those people that maybe are not as good at computers as well, but they have these great ideas. Talk to them a little bit of how they can overcome and just get started.
I think the most important element for any startup, because the difference between a business, a small business, and a startup is one is designed to scale globally and the other one isn't. My gym business could have been, never would have happened, but it could have grown to be like the next 24-hour fitness. So technically a global or whatever brand, but a startup, a true startup is designed from the very beginning to scale globally. So you have to look at it from a completely different perspective on scalability. And if you're going to do a small business or a startup, I think what's most important is the why. If you're just doing it for money, or you're just doing it for, I don't know what, I guess just money, odds are it will never happen. And so for me, it had to be for more than money. I believe we'll save those 35+ million lives that die every year within this decade. And that was really the only thing that motivated me from the very beginning. And then once I did teach myself these things, there's just been so many ups and so many downs with this project, where, especially before, like a couple of years ago, where if there wasn't millions of lives potentially on the line, I would have just quit 100,000 times over. And so the best advice I could give is have the why, do something for more than money, and that will drive you beyond all of the obstacles that in the beginning you might perceive as impossible or nearly impossible.
Obviously the marketing now is very clever, but it seems like it wasn't always like this. When did this TikTok and all the social really start to take off for you?
So about 7 months ago, we met a girl at University of Texas, and she asked if she could be our TikTok intern. And at the time, I didn't even have a TikTok. And so I knew what it was. I erased it because it was so addicting and I didn't want to use it. But she had a bunch of followers, and she said, listen, I just want to make you a video from time to time. And she ultimately just made us 4 videos. But one of those videos got about 50,000 views in a couple of days, which then led to a couple thousand people subscribing and signing up on our website. Most of those people just, we want to support this and we want some free water when it's available. But a few people were asking for quotes and this or that. And so comparing those results against, Google advertising, Facebook ads, and YouTube ads, I spent thousands of dollars and got literally nothing from those. And so then the light bulb went off. Wait a minute. Also in that video, she was giving out a water. And then the light bulb went off. Wait a minute. we're already giving out thousands of waters. What if we could just get some of these people on camera to make videos for us? And kind of, going back in time even before that, I was in Silicon Valley with this project for a year, a couple of years ago, and I had spoken to some really wealthy people, a couple different billionaires, and they had both told me the same thing. Americans don't want free organic groceries. Americans want to pay more for everything. And I'll never believe, only homeless people want free organic food. That's what they said. And I'll never believe what you say that people want free groceries or free computers or free whatever until I see thousands of happy testimonials. Until then, Americans want to pay more. And so keeping that in, which I do not agree with at all, but keeping that in mind, and then when we had that one successful video, I thought, wait a minute, let's make these thousands of testimonials and let's see if the quote unquote TikTok gods appreciate what we do. And so the very next day, we got someone on camera and the video got 100,000 plus views in another day. And that led to thousands of more people visiting the website. And then from there, we started posting 5+ videos daily. And so now, in less than 6 months, between 3 accounts, we have 175,000 followers. And that helps us to get the word out. And obviously, that's how we met.
So, I mean, I'm one of them. So, and that's how I came across it. It just showed up on my feed. So I'm very grateful that I saw it. And do you have a targeter in mind, right? Who is the ideal client that's supporting this, right? Because you do have to run it as a business for it to be able to reach that $5 billion goal. So who are you targeting? Is it an emotional buyer that's attached to the mission?
Everything is about the why. So I think we're mainly targeting people who believe the same concept, which is food, water, and medicine should be free for everybody. And I think all of our users and myself agree that we wish that it wasn't in an ad-supported manner, because I personally hate advertising and data. And I've actually created ways to make all this stuff free and profitable in the future with 0 ads. But we just need to be a much larger company to incorporate that. And so I think we're targeting people that believe what we believe, but while I guess the consumer believes we're targeting them, we're really targeting the advertiser, because advertisers only care when you have a large audience. And so it kind of, it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, that's why I had to ask that question. And it's obviously, I did a lot of research in preparation for this interview, and it's not easy to design a bottle. It's not easy to just get that initial product. Can you talk a little bit about that, right? The actual bottle itself and how much time was involved in that?
A lot. We offer different types of packaging, aluminum bottles and paper cartons. They each have their pros and cons. We're about to line up a different type of container as well soon. And so just finding a manufacturer who will white label for you in the beginning, because we don't own our own factories yet, is really hard to track those companies down. And so with water in general, it's really easy to find manufacturers that do things in plastic bottles, but we didn't think it was very ethical to make water free and do it in a plastic bottle. And so that means that 99.9999% of our manufacturing options go out the window. And so first, it's a matter of finding the manufacturers. Then it's a matter of if they even have any available capacity for you. And there has been a small number of manufacturers that say they won't work with us because they sell water and that will make them obsolete in time. And so that's rare, but it also has happened as well. And so it's tricky. So I think it's trickier for us than most. And so once you find your manufacturing connection, they're going to give you most likely 2 choices. And choice number 1 is the best possible price you could get from the manufacturer, but you're going to have to guarantee an annual minimum amount of units. And if you don't sell those, you still owe them that money. Or option B, which we went with, it's much more expensive, but a pay as you go, no minimum, just. And so most manufacturers obviously want the guaranteed minimum. Hey, we want you to guarantee 1 million beverages a year or 10 million beverages a year. And so it's really hard to find make the right relationships and get it going. It's definitely not easy.
And are your distributions only in the United States right now? What does that plan look like in terms of expansion?
So we have a couple different business models to date. We have direct to the business, which means we help design the aluminum bottles, paper cartons, and we ship it to them and they distribute it themselves. And then we have direct to the consumer, which people often see on TikTok, and we only offer that in Austin at the moment, and we'll scale out from there. And so it will be a long journey, but initially we can't be on a supermarket shelf. The reason being, not because they won't make any money. We could explain why supermarkets would actually make more money with our free product than selling other water brands, but really because it's hard to get on a supermarket shelf, and then every time you change the look of your product, you have to do a stack of paperwork this big. And our water looks different every time we order it. And so because of that, the industry as is isn't designed for a company like us. And so we just bought our first FreeWater truck for last mile delivery, which will help us for delivering directly to the house and basically doing massive giveaways. We've had some brands in the past that say, can you give out 10,000 waters in a single day for us? And I said, no, because that's 12,000 pounds and we can't physically move it, but now we can with a few trips in the truck. And we're also going to launch our first free vending machine prototypes this year. And so those free vending machine prototypes will get used a lot in Austin. That will also enable us to kind of smooth out the software processes, get the bugs out, and those free vending machines would be scalable in any city around the world. And so it's kind of a stepping stone process. We start with the world even knowing that we exist, then we deliver to the doorstep, the vending machines, the trucks, and scale out from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I can't wait to see it in Boston. So we're excited for that. And then I got to ask a financial question, just because this question comes up a lot. Maybe a few financial questions. One of them being, is an investor necessary to really make it in the beverage industry? And when I mean make it, I mean to be on those supermarket shelves or to reach all those 50 states.
I guess that question is the only answer would depend on if you were born rich. If you were born in a very wealthy situation, I guess you wouldn't need any help. But for everybody else, including us, you probably do need to line up investors, and it's extremely hard, and it's an extremely humbling process.
I'm guessing no. You got to get prepared for those no's, right? When somebody tells you no, and then you got to still get up and pitch it again to the next guy and the next girl.
You will hear a lot of no's, and I guess there's the what I call the Silicon Valley investor playbook, which most angel investors and VCs kind of say the exact thing word for word. And the playbook is really old school and it's really generic. And so whatever you tell them, they say, okay, I would like to see a little bit more, traction. And then you reach those milestones and then they're like, okay, let's do some more traction. And by the time some investors are willing to write you a check, you probably have done enough work where you could literally go to the bank and get a loan and not give up any equity. And so there's safe investors, and then there's investors who are more risk adverse or just really believe in what you believe. And so my wife and I tried to do the entire project out of pocket. We really tried, but we were really burdening ourselves financially. And then around September, we just had so much demand to start selling shares that we just went with it. It just seemed like the right thing to do.
And that's good that you're very raw about that and you explain it to people, because it is what we found as well, that in the beverage industry, it is something that you will need a lot of cash flow for. So if you're not born rich, you have to either get ready to go to a bank or make some friends along the way. Which leads me to my next question. What would be considered a success in those first years? One of the biggest problems with most entrepreneurs is that they give up because they think their product is not getting the right feedback, or people just don't really like it, so they hang up their dreams. And it seems like you've kept going with it, even though it is water, but nonetheless, it is a beverage. So what is a good year like for those starter years? If you've sold, what is considered good and keep going?
I think it's a trick question because it took me so many years to get this off the ground. And it literally took me 2 years to invent most of these concepts. And so there was zero attempt to make a sale those first 2 years, and there was zero money coming in, only money going out. And so other founders I meet, they're able to just invent something and try to bring it to market in 6 months or so. But this is a lot more complex. There's a lot more moving parts. I had to reinvent a bunch of wheels. And so the first piece of advice I would give is when you're in the idea stage, and for me, again, that took 2 years. For others, maybe it will be hopefully a lot shorter time. I would actually recommend to get out of America or any rich country or city that you're in, because the cost of rent and living is so high that if you pay your rent, or if you make one mistake, you've probably spent all of your money. On the other hand, when I invented this stuff, I was actually living in Montenegro and Belgrade in Serbia. And so my rent was $200 a month. And so when your rent is $200 a month, I had all the time in the world to invent these things. And so, the first piece of advice I tell anybody is that's in the idea phase, unless you're married or really tied down to something, get out of Austin, get out of Silicon Valley, get out of wherever you are, go to Thailand, go to wherever will make you happy, where you could live on the beach for $300 a month, live an equal or better lifestyle, but afford yourself the ability to make a mistake. Because when I first moved to Silicon Valley, I made a couple of mistakes and they almost doomed the entire project financially. And so if you would have, if I could go back in time, I would tell myself, stay in Eastern Europe longer, make more mistakes there before you bring it to a marquee market. Now, fast forwarding to where we are today, there's been many famous tech companies such as Facebook, Netflix, Twitter, Snapchat, you name it, Uber, where Uber is a multi-billion-dollar company, they still haven't turned a profit.
Yeah.
And so our trajectory in this early stage is as good or better than a Twitter or a Snapchat or a Facebook, because we're actually bringing in revenue. And so we'll reach profitability, knock on wood, by midway or third quarter of this year. But then we'll go back in debt again when we pay for manufacturing, and it will be a back and forth. But I spoke to the founder of Netflix, one of them. I've spoken to some other big time founders, and they didn't have any revenue for more than a year or 2 years sometimes. And so we're in a really, really good spot compared to those legacy startups. And I think what's important is revenues are always important, but I think what's most important is fundamentals and a roadmap to showing why what you're doing is so much better, if that makes sense. And so
no, it does. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
So
I think to a lot listening.
Yeah, for us, our only revenue stream is the physical advertising today. And we earn roughly 20 cents a bottle. But when we manufacture the same products ourselves in the future, we'll earn upwards of 50, 60 cents per bottle. But then when we build out our platform, because this is like we call it an Amazon 2.0, then we start bringing in all these tech revenue streams, such as commission when products are sold. And so an example is, imagine if there was a Lexus advertising on the box, and that already paid for the entire ad space where we're profitable, and then you scan that QR code and you bought that Lexus, we're going to charge 2% for all transactions on our platform in the future, which means $50,000 car. We made $1,000 in commission off of a free water, a free slice of pizza, a free cup of coffee. And so having the fundamentals that show a clear roadmap to, wow, not only is free water that donates to charity profitable, but it can be more than 1,000 times more profitable than selling a water when done correctly. I think that those metrics, and to be able to concisely explain that, is just as important, if not more important, than than revenue, if that makes sense.
And Josh, as I'm hearing you say all these, you mentioned earlier that if we stop doing this, there'll be a competitor tomorrow. Do you foresee competitors coming at you now? What are you doing to protect some of these ideas and really innovative approaches that you've implemented?
Good question. When I first invented all this stuff, the first thing I tried to do was patent all these things. I worked on provisional patents. And then I realized, or at least I felt, that it wasn't very ethical to patent these things. Because when you patent something, you're essentially giving yourself a monopoly. And I don't want a monopoly at trying to save those lives. I want everybody to join in and do it too. And so our goal is actually to get Coke, Pepsi, Nestle, and Amazon to copy as soon as humanly possible. And so we tag them in most of our videos. They definitely know we exist. And so here's the beauty. Coca-Cola would never solve the global water crisis. They don't want to. They want to charge more money for their water, not less. But what really is going to make them upset is we make more money than them doing what the world perceives as the right thing. We don't use plastic, it's free, and we're saving lives with our charitable donations. Eventually, it will be such a PR nightmare for them that they have to copy. And then someone's going to be like, hey, look, that dumbass Josh, he didn't patent any of these things, so we could just copy like that. And at first, when they copy, they'll probably still sell Coca-Cola or Pepsi, but they're going to put ads on it. And maybe they'll discount it a nickel or a dime, because that's what's going to make them the most money. And just to add to the PR, they're going to say, hey, we're going to donate 1 penny per can to whatever cause, right? Whatever cause is important to the Coke CEO, probably. And when you do the math on their economies of scale, that would be one of the largest redistributions of wealth in human history. And not through a sense of socialism or anything, it's a sense of them volunteering it as a way to survive. And so that's the goal, is to, I guess, raise the bar of business ethics higher. And by doing and showing that it is more profitable to do that, and then getting these major companies to copy. So there's zero protection. I give all of the toughest secrets, or anything that was really difficult for me to figure out, I just blab about how to do it more easily on the internet. And I hope that they copy tomorrow.
I feel like there's a Netflix special coming on this soon. And I'm excited to know more and more about it. I mean, this is definitely different from a lot of people we've sat down with. It's definitely different. Most people will answer that question with patent pending. We already have filed, but that's very different.
I mean,
credibility.
If Coca-Cola beats us at saving the world or saving millions and millions of lives, is that really a bad thing? I don't think so.
No, it's not. It's a great thing. And wish I knew this. Any wish I knew this. It seems like you have a lot of them, but if you can highlight one out, something you wish somebody would have told you about this beverage industry that you figured out the wrong way or the hard way.
It wouldn't be the beverage industry, it would just be startups in general. And so I got lucky because I invented this stuff while working with refugees in Eastern Europe. And so I was living in Eastern Europe. And again, that gave me a long runway, as long as I needed to invent this stuff. When I went to Silicon Valley, I was in too big of a hurry. Why was I in too big of a hurry? A, because it was so expensive to be there. And B, I look at it as millions of people are dying just because I don't have Americans saving money. So I better hurry up, because those lives are lost are kind of my fault. And so I got into business with the wrong people. They seemed like the right people at the time. On paper, they had really tremendous resumes, but all they cared about was the money and not the social impact. And so it ultimately caused me to shut down my first startup. I had to walk away from my own startup because I didn't feel that those people were being very ethical. And then I had to start over again from scratch. And when I started over again from scratch, it turned out that was only 90 days before the pandemic started. And so it wasn't the best timing in some cases, and sometimes cases it was. And so I guess, what did I learn from that experience? You have to be really careful in a startup who you get involved with. And the people who I really regret hiring were beyond or at the peak of their career on paper. However, they had zero drive and eye of the tiger anymore. They were at the peak of their career, but basically from all their hard work that they had done in the past. And they really didn't have that drive to do whatever it takes. And so if you asked me then, I would have said, I'm looking for the most qualified people to get involved. You know, if you ask me today, it has to be that right balance between qualified and hungry. And even if they're 0% qualified, I would rather take the hungriest person who really cares about changing the status quo on the way that the world works. As long as they have a good personality, then that person who's got that really fancy resume. Because with a startup, especially if you're doing something that no one's ever done before, you're making it up as you go along a lot of the time anyways. And so everybody needs to learn a lot. You need to try something, fail quickly, throw it away, start over, repeat that countless times. And if you're really not hungry, they're not going to be good people to work with, because you really have to keep iterating, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And to go along with that, any branding advice? I know when you get started out, sometimes you overcomplicate it, right? You overcomplicate like how you want your brand to be perceived. And it seems that yours is very simple. Any branding advice?
I mean, my branding advice would be counterintuitive than most companies, because we make money by sharing our real estate with others. Usually you use your real estate to brand yourself. But the most counterintuitive thing is, if you brand your competition, you would make a lot more money. So if Coca-Cola, if every can of Coca-Cola had a Pepsi ad on it, Coke would make more money than if they just sold it with the Coke logo on it. And so I would say, be careful what you do with your real estate, because there's always a lot of opportunities, even if it means adding some QR codes for yourself that play videos, that have a make an appointment. If real estate, everyone has their own piece of real estate, and you got to be very precise with what you do with it. And in regards to just branding in general, I would just say it needs to make sense. And so why we chose the name FreeWater is the name explains itself, right? And so if it was different, I think it would be harder to understand.
That's FreeWater. And we're winding down the interview here. I have just a few more questions for you. One of them being particular mindset, right? You've traveled, you've had ups, downs, you've traveled so many places. I feel like you've restarted a few times. Mindset is a big deal, right? Some people just are negative, pessimistic. They sort of drive themselves down. What's your mindset like, Josh, when you wake up in the morning and you're facing some great days and maybe some not so good days?
There's zero room for being pessimistic. I mean, in not just a startup, but if you want to achieve anything that's difficult in life, like, you can't be pessimistic at all. And so my typical day is, I usually start at around 8:15 in the morning, and I don't end until about somewhere between midnight or 3 in the morning. And so I've been working 7 days a week, and I've been doing this now for years. And you just have to, that's why you have to have the why. You know, there's zero, I would never be able to do any of this stuff if I didn't think that it was gonna not save a bunch of lives. And so if it was just for money, I would have not be doing this. I would still be living in Eastern Europe or somewhere in Europe. I would still be, if you don't have the why behind your movement, and if you're not positive, I just think that it'll be 0% possible to achieve any of it.
It's fun because that was my next question. So how many hours do you spend? We asked that question because today a lot of people have an unrealistic expectation of entrepreneurship, because at times it's glorified, right? Where it's made to be this glamorous thing on social media, and we have a lot of younger members who sometimes quit because they're like, well, I didn't think it was going to be this many hours, I thought it was going to be better than a 9 to 5. So yours is 8 to 2, 8 to 12.
I would say, I guess everyone has their own motivation for creating their own company or own project. And so personally, if the why's not there, I would say don't do it and go live in another country and enjoy life. And, because life is a lot more than making money. And, like using Albania as an example, I would much rather go live on the beach in Saranda for a year or travel through Berat or Tirana or wherever than literally do the stuff that you have to do to be successful as a business owner, or even harder as a startup, because that startup again is meant to scale globally. However hard you think you've ever worked before, it's going to be that times 100. And it's literally going to break you down over and over and over and over again. And so that's why most people quit, because it's just so hard. So it's like, if you don't have that why, if you don't have a problem that bothers you so much to the point of insanity that you have to solve it, don't bother. Just go enjoy life. Go to the beach, do whatever makes you happy. Don't do this.
Well, those are all my questions. I'll just have one final remark and then I'll let you close it. And I'll say that the people listening on Rootless, some of those are those children in Berat and Tirana, and many like them around the world who maybe don't have the best start in life, but nonetheless have this drive to change where they are and keep driving forward. I'll let you close it if you have any message for those listening. And I know that this story is going to excite a lot of people, but I'll let you take the floor in any message that you want to leave them with.
Obviously, not everybody's born in the same situation. Being middle class in the US is much different than being middle class in Eastern Europe or in Southeast Asia or wherever. So everybody gets dealt a different, I guess, hand of cards. However, we happen to live in an interesting time where, I learned just about everything I know from YouTube. And so, YouTube and places like it can be a wonderful source, a wealth of information if you find yourself looking in the right places. If you look in the wrong places, it could obviously drag you down as well. And so I'm pretty optimistic in that, it doesn't matter how hard you row your boat if you row it in the wrong direction. So as long as you've got a good direction with your compass, and if you're relentless and you use free resources such as YouTube or Free Code Camp or whatever's out there, there's definitely a high probability of success in doing something special.
There you have it. Joshua, thank you so much for sitting down and giving us a perspective of FreeWater and the journey that you've embarked on. And I think it's very honorable and remarkable, really. And I can't wait to see it around Boston and maybe even Albania. So thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Greta. Thank you.